As the chairperson of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, all of us are waiting with great eagerness to see the recommendations that you make to the President and to the public. I believe that that report has gone to the presidency. Is that so? And could you share with us some of the cornerstone recommendations?
Thanks, Ferial. I'm really delighted to be here because it gives me the opportunity to talk about this report and its recommendations. And I will comment on Colette's presentation. Colette was intimately involved in helping us draft the report, conceptualizing the report, and we've had excellent support from the ISS. Continue to work with the ISS in the next phase of our work. So let me just make an initial observation about current thinking about the way the current discourse in the country is being framed, anti-corruption discourse is being framed. What is right about the current emphasis on criminal law enforcement, on the work that Andrea is doing and the MPA is doing? What is right about it is that we have to improve investigation and prosecution of criminal corruption. It's really essential in the fight against corruption because that's also going to help us win support from the public who want to see results. And the Zondo Commission has done amazing work, focused on, if you like, a particular category of bad actors in the state system. But what Andrea's, about what Colette's report shows is that the time is right for a conceptual shift in the way we think about corruption, in the way we think about anti-corruption reform. So you're correct. We have produced a midterm report. It follows on 4 advisory opinions, which included the focus on funding of political parties, procurement, and so forth. And the midterm report has been received by the presidency. I received about 2 weeks ago an acknowledgement of the receipt of the report and considerable support from the tone and content of the letter. The report, I've now presented the report to the Forum of Director Generals. The next step will be to present the report to the Criminal Justice Cluster. Andrea was present when I presented the report to the forum she sits in. And we're then going to have to see, I'm in discussions with DG Baleni about, who's also given us tremendous support, by the way, to at what point we release the report in the form possibly of a discussion document or a green paper for public engagement on one track, and on the other track, we want to get to the point where there is a cabinet decision. And the process I've described is that pathway. So what's in the report? We have recommended the establishment of a new anti-corruption agency called the Office of Public Integrity. And it's largely informed by the conceptual framework that you've heard elaborated this morning by Colette. So firstly, we've rethought what we mean by corruption. Our proposal is specifically aimed at addressing the problem of systemic corruption. Systemic corruption is a much broader concept than the way we've understood state capture. It potentially covers any corrupt institution throughout the country. and you pointed out in your opening remarks, it's in fact quite problematic at this point to think about corruption as limited to the state capture inquiry. For those who are interested in this concept of systemic corruption, which we've incorporated into our report, read the affidavit of the CEO of VBS, where he describes precisely in one very interesting paragraph the modus operandi that Colette described, where you have an institution that is corrupted by a set of actors who in fact have a governance framework, a way of rewarding and punishing individual participants to ensure coherence, who operate in secret and so forth. VBS is in fact an interesting case of systemic corruption because it's clear that we should think about that institution, not so much as having been captured, but as being systemically corrupt. So we have framed our proposals in the light of that concept. Second, and if it follows, is the focus on prevention. What we've identified in the current institutional matrix is a huge gap on the prevention side. So while Andrea is going to be doing very important work and Shamila dealing with those after the fact who've been identified as criminal suspects, we've got to do the important work of identifying corruption proactively at an early stage. Let me take the example, which I'm very interested in, of Tembisa Hospital. If you have an agency that can go into that hospital once it has some kind of triggering evidence or so, conduct systemic audits, for instance, into their procurement systems, propose binding corrective action, you can start to root out corruption in a hospital, in a port, in a local authority. So the second is this idea of prevention. The third way in which we're proposing that the current thinking, dominant thinking in a way about the fight against corruption be that our thinking evolves, is to understand the importance in our country of having a multi-agency approach. So the dominant thinking, if you look at the proposals that are being floated, is that what we need is in fact a magic bullet, one huge anti-corruption agency, collapse the MPA into this new agency to focus, to incorporate powers of investigation, prosecution, even policing powers, and to focus on criminal law enforcement after the fact. It leaves out of our anti-corruption efforts behavior change, public education, public involvement, prevention, and so forth and so forth. So we need to fill that gap, and we need to fill that gap in a realistic, feasible way as part of our current institutional matrix. So our proposals don't interfere with the powers of the DPCI. That's beginning to do really important work. We're building on what the SIU is currently achieving, and we're seeking to strengthen the work that Andrea and Shamila are doing on the prosecution side. My final point would be this. There's no magic bullet. So we should be thinking about anti-corruption reform as a long-term project of institutional reform that is comprehensive, that is all government, all society, and that is rooted in our own historical context as well as our current context. So I'm in full agreement that economic inclusion is part of the fight against corruption. But our current thinking prevents us from approaching corruption in a way that is specific to our context, that is comprehensive. And success of our anti-corruption efforts is going to depend on this paradigm shift, if you like.
Thank you very much for the insights into 4 touch points. Up with a former minister, but we'll chat about that later. So I'm going to take questions now. I can get them ready, but I've got a lot online, so let's whip through them quickly. Obviously, Prof, first on to you as the chairperson of NACAC, and this is from Pops Rampasad of Active Citizens Movement. The council is tasked with an all-of-society approach to fighting corruption. What mechanisms are in place, are you about to put in place to ensure accountability to citizens and civil society organizations? They wrote to you in March, on March the 13th, 2024, regarding whistleblower advisories sent to the president. And then what's the current status of the whistleblower bill? I'm not sure if anybody knows that. So I must share a little story just to tell you how big an issue this is. There's somebody who's told us about a 2 billion rand slush fund in Gauteng. Gauteng is the center of many things. The person wants to make a protected disclosure. The only place where I trust to send them to is the whistleblower house at the moment. So if you could answer some of those questions for us, please. First, the all of society response.
Well, the new proposed agency is informed by an all-society approach. The idea is that the new agency should be able, for instance, to have public inquiries, engage in public education projects and so forth. And so obviously our response to that challenge is to propose, which is what we were asked to do, advise the president on setting up an institution that could implement an all-society, all-government approach. On whistleblowing, I mean, I think that's, you know, a critical area of policy reform. Tandeka, Kubule, and Becky was our headed up our work stream on whistleblowing. She's worked with the Department of Justice. In that area, we think the Department of Justice has produced excellent policy proposals that now require legislative changes. So she worked very closely with the Department of Justice. We also made a recommendation to the president that in the interim, we recommended that that he appoint a judge to deal with such matters until new institutional arrangements have been put in place. That was not, we haven't received a response to that proposal. We discussed it with Chief Justice Zondo. Don't think he thought that it was a workable proposal. So I think we're in a period of reform around whistleblowing. We've made proposals to, you know, for consideration by government.
Thank you very much. Got one from Barbara Holtman. Maybe you could take this, Yasmin. In Joburg, the widespread belief that corruption is rife in the city leads to increasing numbers of people saying that the only way to get anything done or signed or to stay out of jail is to pay a bribe. Every time that happens, we move closer to chaos that causes people to go. Change is urgent. The perception of corruption, the actual corruption, and the steady flow of people who give up on legitimate processes is very real.
Yeah, could I just, I
Yes.
forgot something. In our recommendations on the OPI, we have proposed that one